Welcome back to Math Dogs. If you're new to the channel, please comment, like, and subscribe. If you have any questions, please drop a comment in the comment section down below, and we will do our best to answer any questions. Today's topic is the ACT Math test and the 3 steps to success. Remember, we believe math is better with your dog, so call your pups and let's get started. The truth is, there's no one trick that is going to make you get a 36, and there's no one trick that is going to suddenly jump your score 10 points. However, if you have a plan and you put forth the time and effort, you can definitely be successful on the ACT Math test. Today we're going to look at the Math Dogs plan. Simply put, our 3 steps are memorize, learn, and practice. We're going to go through each part to see what you need to memorize, what topics you need to learn, and how to practice properly. You don't have to do the steps in order. You can do little pieces from each one as you do your ACT prep. Just remember, putting in the time leads to success. The first step is memorize. Just like any test you would take in high school, certain information has to be memorized. Not only will it help you solve the problems on the test, it will cut down on the amount of time you need punching into a calculator. For example, if I know that 8 times 7 is 56, and I don't have to use a calculator, I can get a couple seconds back on the questions. Same thing with the addition facts. If you know that 5 plus 9 is 14, and you don't have to think about it or use a calculator, it can help you save you time for harder questions. Square numbers. Knowing that 2 squared is 4, or 8 squared is 64, or 16 squared is 256 will help with time. Same thing with the cubed numbers. Knowing that 3 cubed is 27, or 5 cubed is 125 can help with time. The powers of 2. Knowing that 2 squared is 4, and 2 to the 3rd is 8, and 2 to the 4th is 16. Having these memorized will definitely help with time issues. If you need a review on these, check out the links in the description for worksheets on each topic. Next, know your integer operations and rules. Knowing that a negative times a negative is a positive, or a negative plus a negative is a negative, will help you work through the questions a lot quicker. Knowing fraction, decimal, and percent equivalencies, such as 1/4 is the same thing as 25%, can help you when problem solving. Having all of these facts at your fingertips is beneficial when reading through the problems. Now let's go over the formulas you should know for the exam. Both the geometry formulas and the algebra formulas are not given to you on the test. You should know how to find the area of squares, circles, triangles, as well as be familiar with the circumference formula. If you need a quick review, please look in the description down below for links to our videos, as well as worksheets that detail each of these formulas. Some of the most prominent algebraic formulas that you will need on the exam are the slope formula and the slope-intercept form, y equals mx plus b. You can expect to see problems that will reference your knowledge on these basic formulas. So learn them, get comfortable, and get ready. Last, you'll need to memorize the Pythagorean triples for right triangles, 3, 4, 5, and 5, 12, 13. Again, because the relationships for right triangles are always the same, memorizing them will save you a lot of time. Next is learn. There's 24 different topics that show up a lot on the practice tests. This is not a review of each topic, but we will go over a list of what you need to know. If you go through the checklist handout, you can go back and review, use MathDogs videos, ask your teacher for extra help, and as you master each one, you can check it off the list. So let's get started. Ratio and proportion. Ratio and proportion are questions like, there's 3 dogs and 5 cats. What's the ratio of dogs to cats? Which would be 3 to 5. What's the ratio of dogs to all the animals? It would be 3 to 8, both part to part and part to whole. Fraction operations. You should know how to add, subtract, multiply, and divide fractions on paper. This will save you time from having to punch them into your calculator and give you more time to actually think about and work on other questions. Percent problems. Again, you may have had these in middle school. 3 is what percent of 48? For that, you might set up an equation or set up a proportion. For averages, there's 2 types of questions. There's the basic average question. For example, given these 5 numbers, find the average by adding them up and dividing by 5. The more advanced average questions, such as if I added an extra number to the data set, how would that change the average? Next, Scientific notation. You should know how to go back and forth between scientific notation and regular number form. You should also know how to multiply and divide numbers in scientific notation. Probability questions. If there's 3 red marbles in a jar with 22 marbles, what's the probability of picking a red marble, which would just be 3 out of 22? Again, if you click in the description, you'll find a handout with a checklist of the things to memorize, as well as the things to learn, so you can keep track of your ACT prep. Least common multiple and greatest common factor. These would be the questions such as, given 3, 12, and 24, what's the least common multiple? Or, if I had to add fractions or subtract fractions, what's the least common denominator? They could also ask, given these numbers, find the greatest common factor. Some of these middle school topics you may not have seen in a while. Use MathDogs videos and handouts to help you review and practice. Mean, median, and mode are the measures of central tendency. You may have had these also in middle school and just need to review them. Mean is the average, median the middle number when you put the numbers in order, and the mode is the number that shows up most often. Solving equations is one of the most basic principles of algebra, such as 3x plus 5 equals negative 22. Knowing quickly that I have to subtract 5 and divide by 3, as well as some more complex types of equations that involve both combining like terms or the distributive property. Again, finding information and practicing these are going to be very beneficial. Radicals can be square roots or cube roots. For example, what's the square root of 25? Well, having your square numbers memorized helps you answer that question easily. It could be simplifying. How do I take the square root of 8x cubed? Or how do I multiply the square root of 8x cubed times the square root of 2x to the 4th? Also, knowing that fractional exponents represent roots and how these behave will help you solve and answer these questions. Exponent properties. If I have 2 numbers or variables with the same base and I multiply them together, I have to add the exponents. If I divide with the same base, I have to subtract the exponents. And if I raise them to another power, I have to multiply the exponents. Again, use the MathDogs videos to review. You may have seen it and you just need a bit of review, and you can check it off your list that you've mastered it. Factoring questions might look like x squared plus 5x plus 6. How do I break that into its 2 factors of x plus 2 times x plus 3? Next, we have FOIL for multiplying 2 binomials. If I have x plus 8 times 3x plus 2, I can use FOIL. First, outer, inner, last, to be able to multiply those. Use the MathDogs videos and worksheets attached to the description to review these skills. Imaginary numbers, knowing that I equals the square root of negative 1, and that I squared equals negative 1, as well as complex numbers and their operations, such as 3 plus 5i. How do I multiply those, and how do I divide those? The midpoint and distance formulas should be in your list of memorized formulas. Given 2 points, what's the midpoint? Or, given 2 points, what's the distance between them? Next, we have lines and slope. Knowing that slope is the change in y over the change in x, or rise over run on a graph, as well as knowing the slope-intercept form y equals mx plus b, where m represents the slope and b represents the y-intercept. Questions like that will definitely show up. Simplifying expressions. For these questions, you need to know what terms, variables, and coefficients are. You may be asked to use the distributive properties, such as what is 5 times 2x minus 9? Or you may be asked to combine like terms. Reviewing the order of operations will help you be able to master this topic. Then we get into some geometry. Circles. You have some basic things like what's the area of a circle, or what's the circumference of a circle. Knowing these formulas and having them memorized will help you answer those questions. For more complex questions, maybe you have to review the theorems from your geometry class. What happens when you have tangents to a circle? How do they behave? Again, find the information. Look in the MathDogs videos. Check them off your checklist as you go. Next, we have angle relationships. If you remember, there are things that are complementary angles, where the 2 angles add up to 90, or supplementary angles, where they add up to 180 degrees, or two angles that are bisected, and we have to find the missing value is on the test. Again, review your angle relationships and use some MathDogs videos or other videos to help you. Parallel line relationships. Two parallel lines cut by a transversal, and all of the angles on the inside and how they relate to one another will show up on the ACT math test. SOHCAHTOA, which is from trigonometry. Given a right triangle, what are the relationships for sine, cosine, and tangent? Knowing the opposite side, the adjacent side, and the hypotenuse. Pythagorean theorem should definitely be a formula you have memorized. One of the most famous formulas in geometry, leg squared plus leg squared equals hypotenuse squared. Right triangle questions using the Pythagorean theorem formula will definitely show up on the ACT math test. Similar triangles. Two triangles that are similar means they are proportional. You can set up a proportion and you are able to find a missing side. And last, basic matrix operations. Usually it's just adding and subtracting, where all you have to do is add the numbers or subtract the numbers as you see them located in the matrices. Or maybe you have to multiply a number, which means just multiplying each number in the matrix by the quantity. So these are the 24 different things that you should learn. Again, use the checklist provided in the description. As you go through each and you feel comfortable with them, check them off. Say, I know this. The third step would be practice. Well, how do I practice? First and foremost, practice using your calculator. Do I know how all the buttons on my calculator work? Do I know where my exponent key is? Do I know where my square root key is? Do I know where my negative sign is? How do I put in fractions if I have to? Many students get to the test and they try to learn their calculator during the test, which takes up time. If you don't, ask your teacher for some help. You should also check the document from ACT regarding calculators to make sure yours is approved. A link to this document can be found in the description for this video. Next, take practice tests, both timed and untimed. You can take a full math practice test of 60 minutes. Set the timer and sit down in a quiet place and see if you can get through all the problems. You can also break it up. Maybe just do the first 20 and set your timer for 20 minutes, or maybe do problems 21 through 40 in 20 minutes, or maybe do the first 30. You can also reverse that process and see how long does it take you to get through the first 20 problems. Also, know the test breakdown, that there's 3 different categories of questions: preparing for higher levels of math, integrating essential skills, and modeling. Taking untimed tests definitely exposes you to the question language. One of the biggest issues with ACT is reading. The question language is very specific, and the vocabulary is sometimes difficult to break through. So looking through practice questions untimed helps you get through the question language. What exactly are they asking me to do mathematically here? Once I get through all the words of the question. Also, taking timed or untimed tests can help you practice strategies. For example, which questions lend themselves to plugging in the answers to help me? Or which questions lend themselves to having me draw a diagram that might help me? If you don't practice the strategies, then you're not going to be able to use them on the test properly. Just listening to the strategies or having somebody show you the strategies, but never practicing them, is not going to be beneficial. And last, but definitely not least, tackling word problems. The more word problems you read, the better you're going to do. Many times a problem has a whole lot of words in it, but the math is actually very straightforward. The more practice tests that you look at, and the more practice problems that you look at with the word problems, will definitely help you break through that language and see exactly what they're asking you to do on the test. So that's it. The 3 steps MathDogs plan for ACT success. Memorize, learn, and practice. Notice we didn't intend this to be a review, and like I said, you don't have to work them in order. I would suggest printing out the handout that's attached to the video in the description section, and as you go through and master each piece, or you memorize each piece, you can check that off, putting in the time and effort. Using other MathDogs videos, asking your teacher, and taking practice tests. So until next time, we'll see you. Remember, you got this.